Hello and welcome everyone, and thanks for being with us for today's webinar, Introducing Disaster Avoidance, Leading the Fight Against Day-Old Data, brought to you by ArcServe. A reminder that this webinar is being recorded. You'll receive an email from us within a couple of days with the link to check out the recording on demand. Also, there's a Q&A box on your screen. When you submit a question, it'll disappear from your box and queue up on our side. But don't worry, we have it, and we'll ask those questions at the end. If we don't get to your questions, we'll be able to follow up with you after the event. There's also a live chat, so jump in and have a conversation with your fellow IT pros. Also, be sure to check out the resources section for some links to get some more information. So let's get started. Our presenters today are Christophe Bertrand, VP of Product Marketing, and Keith Summers, Senior Product Manager, both at ArcServe. So Christophe, I'll hand it to you to get started.
Hello everyone. Hello Spice Heads. Real pleasure to be back on one of these sessions and very lively chat. So if I have a few more minutes, today I will try to join back again. So today we're going to talk about what we call disaster avoidance and really the fight against day-old data. So what does day-old data look like? Kind of like that, right? You could have a number of visuals. This was the least offensive we could pick, but you get the idea, right? Why would you recover data that's old? I mean, it makes no sense. And why would you recover data that's old quickly? It makes zero sense at all. So what we're going to talk about today, after a quick intro on about ArcServe, is one of our solutions that allows you to get very good RPO and RTO in a cloud type of service and with some very unique characteristics. So Keith will also do a demo of this solution, so you'll get to see it for yourselves. So with this in mind, let's talk a little bit about ArcServe. For those of you who don't know us, ArcServe has been around as a brand and a business for many years. Actually, we have a ton of experience in backup and recovery, disaster recovery, etc. And in the past few years, we've become independent again. So we are a company that is a global business, which gives us a great advantage, which is the fact that we understand a lot of very different type of problems that come up when it comes to BCDR. And we've pretty much seen it all. It's kind of like that insurance commercial. There's been some crazy stuff out there, and we've probably seen that. We've been very successful with our solutions. We've most recently introduced a few new solutions. One of them is called ArcServe Unified Data Protection, which is a software and an appliance. We've gotten a bunch of awards, and most recently we had a couple additional solutions join the family. And one of them is what we call the Cloud Direct portfolio of solutions, and that's what we'll talk about. In any case, we've been very successful as an independent company. We're on a path to keep on growing, and we thank all of you who are joining today, maybe our customers for your business, and we certainly hope we can have conversations with more of you guys. So let's talk about our focus, which is the mid-sized type of organizations, and what we mean by again avoiding recovering day-old data and really getting to the point where you can get to that level of resiliency that makes sense for any organization. So in the, we're sort of comparing the old world and the new world, right? So the reality is that in the old world, think a few years ago, not that long ago, as a matter of fact, the very high level of service that you could get for BCDR, the minutes of recovery time objective or recovery point objectives were really reserved only to those larger type of enterprises, typically in the finance world, where people would do crazy stuff like encrypted data over the Atlantic and get less than a few milliseconds of delay, and essentially they could afford to do that, and they would do that at a very, very high price tag, typically leveraging replication technology driven from storage arrays. And that's an area I know well because that's what I used to work in. So this has changed, though. The good news is that because of innovation, because of technology advancing in a number of areas, because of the availability of bandwidth, and really good bandwidth these days, candidly, in most of Northern America, we have the ability to now provide a very high level of service for BCDR, at the same time meeting a requirement that has also tremendously changed. A few years ago, before the internet was invented by Al Gore, there was barely any transaction going on online, and we're talking maybe less than 20 years ago. And 10 years ago, it really started picking up pretty aggressively, and it's been on an exponential curve ever since. In turn, what that means is that if you're a mid-sized business or an organization in maybe local government or in education, it doesn't matter. You are relying 100% on the technology these days. And should transactions not be available, should your systems be down, should your website not be taking those orders, should your again your web portal not be providing services to the population of students or to the people, the inhabitants of your city, you have a problem. So the expectation is that you're always on. And I also call this the iPhoneization of the world, where everybody expects everything at a touch of a finger, really, with an app. And the truth is, the reality is not like that. You have limited budgets. There's only so much you can do with the staff you have, and there are many additional threats you have to deal with. Ransomware being a big one of them. The traditional ones, the IT and power failures, et cetera, those are not to be neglected. I mean, look at the weather conditions we've had just in the past few days in the Northeast. Look at last year, how many bad events did we have in the South? It's just, those things happen too. And ultimately, when you're a mid-sized business, it's now not an excuse anymore for you not to be in business. So things have really evolved. And from that standpoint, what we want to do is really sort of change the way the technology can help you. So we want to go from what would be the traditional complex and expensive and requiring a lot of people, big budget type of organizations to deliver great SLAs to a solution that's going to be essentially affordable but very easy to deploy and easy to use. And ultimately, the objective is to really increase productivity as you decrease your costs and meet your recovery point objectives and recovery time objectives. So that's what the trends are. In order to support that, a number of technologies are needed. Those technologies revolve around virtualization, replication, and of course, cloud. And well, it turns out that might be what we're going to talk about today. So, because of the way we protect business, because that has fundamentally changed, we've come up through an acquisition of the technology here with what we call ArcServe UDP Cloud Direct. And as the name creatively indicates, it's essentially a solution that allows you to back up and recover directly to and from the cloud. And that's the ArcServe Cloud. So it's essentially, we host it. It's in our data centers. It's not going to public cloud, which is another option we support with other parts of our portfolio. This is fundamentally disaster recovery as a service and backup as a service solution that was born in the cloud, and that's why we brought it into the family. And what we're delivering with the latest updates is unique in the industry. You can go direct to cloud with less than 5 minutes RTO and 15 minutes RPO, so recovery point objective, meaning you can get back on your feet with a VM that will essentially stand up in our cloud that you can access from anywhere if you have a web browser, from your favorite Starbucks if you want, only to name a coffee brand. You can access that VM, and it will be up and running in a matter of minutes. And then the data that it's going to bring back, the systems, et cetera, will be 15 minutes old. Now, of course, your mileage will vary, depends on the bandwidth, depends on the last time you synced, but the ability to sync every 15 minutes with the characteristics we're offering here, that's unique in the industry, and it requires no hardware on premise. So I'll talk about some of the use cases. I'm not saying that's the only way you should do backup and recovery. Absolutely not. It's another tool for you to really solve that big data protection equation you have to deal with. This is optimized for mid-market type of workloads. It has a number of technologies built in to optimize the transfer of data between your servers and our cloud, and it has a very easy-to-use interface and console that gives you access to a lot of capabilities. But honestly, if you know how to use a browser and you have a couple of things about backup, you don't have to have a PhD in backup. You can make this work. This is really designed for ease of use and very, very intuitive. And the good news is that we have this in a great data center, which has great security. And obviously, that's a very, very critical piece of the equation here, because you're not going to send data up to the cloud and send it to an environment that would be less secure than your own environment. As a matter of fact, many of our customers are telling us, you know what, I'm using this solution because I know that you have a level of security that I probably can't afford in my own data center because, hey, it's a big data center, et cetera, and we're a smaller company. So that makes perfect sense. But the good news is that it's really about the ease of use, the 5 minutes RTO and the 15 minutes RPO here, and that combination, again, direct to cloud, is very unique. So the use cases that I wanted to mention here, and again, I want to remind you that you can ask your questions, and we're going to go through a demo, so I'm sure you'll have a ton of additional questions that will come up as we go through the demo. Some of the use cases we've identified for you are essentially, one of them that I think is very typical is you have a decentralized type of organization. Maybe you have a number of field offices. You may have a big data center somewhere, but then you have a bunch of remote offices. This would be a great solution for this, or field offices. For example, maybe you're an engineering firm or architectural firm or something like that, and you have people in the field who have to have access to all sorts of documents, and should anything happen, they need to have access to those documents quickly, otherwise the work stops. And that's just not an option. And by the way, again, I want to reiterate, while I believe direct-to-cloud is definitely a very successful way to protect your data, it's okay to back up locally as well, on-premise, and we have other parts of our portfolio that help you do that. It's absolutely a first line of defense, and we support that view as well. What I'm saying is, when you think about it, there are a number of systems, even on-premise, that you could actually send direct to the cloud, but you could only focus this way on specific apps on-premise, or, again, those decentralized offices that are such a pain in the neck to manage, because you're not going to have someone to manage IT in all of them, each of them. And you know what happens if you leave IT to end users? We all know what happens. You don't want to do that. So this allows you to make sure that, number one, if anything happens, you have a great backup or a great way to bring the systems back online for them. But more importantly, it gives you the ability to distribute your SLAs across the whole organization in a way that's going to be very coherent and in a way that's going to be very consistent. And that's really what matters. Again, we're designed for mid-market environments, and we have built our data center stack to be extremely available and to be very easy to scale. We've optimized sort of in the back end how the data is not only stored, but also how we bring back the VMs very quickly, how we can make that available to you very quickly from a disaster recovery perspective. And when you look at the cost of it, literally we've made our solution, we've priced our solution to be in a price range that you're going to find very competitive to other disaster recovery service providers. And it's something that is, again, designed for mid-market organizations. We understand the pressures on your budget, and we know you have to deliver these great services and these great service levels. It's just hard to do without a lot of money, and we understand that, and that's why we have optimized our technology so that it can be delivered to you at that price point. So if you look at other options you may have, again, from a disaster recovery as a service perspective, I was just touching upon that, but, out there, typically a lot of solutions are not optimized for mid-market. They are really designed for the enterprise, or they lack some capabilities. They are consumer grade or they're enterprise grade, but what's in the middle? And that's really what we're bringing to the table, that perfect combination where you can get to enterprise level characteristics in terms of RPO and RTO, but also the ability to do this in a way that's really optimized and not too complex. So the configuration, for example, the perfect example, we have a very easy configuration, and it's easy to go, add and change your parameters in our console. As a matter of fact, you're going to see it in a matter of minutes, so you can see for yourselves. So I was talking about our portfolio, and really how it fits and what else we do in it. And there are a few things that I want to mention. Now, this looks like a lot of stuff is going on here. I just keep it simple for you. We are going to be releasing very, very soon a fantastic cloud-based or web-based console. So stay tuned for that. That's coming up. But it will allow you to manage everything ArcServe essentially. So if you think about the use cases, the solutions that we offer, and the terms you may use, or what you may be looking to implement, it's going to range from high availability to all the way through disaster recovery, backup and recovery, and archiving. But see, these used to be old, what I call silos, right? You would, in the past, go out and say, oh, I need an archiving thing, or I need a high availability type of solution. It would be all over the place. What we're proposing here is one-stop shop. In very much the same way, we provide unified data protection on-premise with our UDP solution, bringing together actually all of these capabilities. We're going to do this with the ability to bring in and combine cloud deployments. And that's really what we're going to be doing with our portfolio and what we're adding in terms of building blocks. And again, for you, the ability to deploy in a way that makes sense. If you like on-premise, great. We'll help you with that first line of defense, whether it's software or an appliance, or if you like public cloud, great. We have that option for you as well. And of course, private cloud type of services, backup, recovery, and stay tuned soon, archiving as well. So we have a great set of technologies sort of under the hood, and that's really what our technology is about. Bring the best of best capabilities, but we try to keep that complexity under the hood for you, so you can manage everything in an easy way from very intuitive consoles. Again, our job is to give you the ability to deliver enterprise-level class services with a lot of simplicity. Everything we do is essentially based on that. So now we're going to get into the more technical part of the conversation. I'm going to turn it over to Keith, who is our Senior Product Manager for our cloud solutions, and we're going to take you through the architecture of Cloud Direct and then a demonstration. So, Keith, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Christophe, and hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this presentation today. Happy to be here and happy that you guys have joined us. So what I want to do is take a quick minute to provide an architectural or workflow overview, if you will, of the UDP, or the Unified Data Protection Cloud Direct Disaster Recovery as a Service solution. So for the most part, it starts with deploying a lightweight software agent onto a server. This is the agent-based approach. We also support agentless protection for VMware and Hyper-V as well. So that's not a problem. But in this diagram, it's an agent-based approach. What we do, we capture an image of the server, and that server image is securely transferred, as Christophe mentioned, from your on-prem environment directly to the cloud. We know that there are other solutions that offer you the opportunity to store something on-prem, and then it sends it to the cloud. But this goes directly from on-prem into the cloud to give you that quick off-site protection of your servers. Now, that data, as it's transferred, is encrypted in flight as well as encrypted within the data center at rest. So you have that assurance that your data is indeed protected. Now, the way that is protected is we provision for you a virtual data center within our data center. You have all the components that you need in order to run that as a virtual data center in the event of a disaster, or if you so choose to do a test. You get a firewall, you get a VPN server to allow that connectivity to that site. And all of this is managed through our web browser or our web-hosted management interface. So if you have access to a web browser and access to the internet, you can manage all of this capability easily and quickly. So another piece of the puzzle is being able to spin up virtual instances of those servers that have been transferred from on-prem into the cloud. Very key when we speak of disaster recovery. You move the data from on-prem into the cloud. The next step, as part of the disaster recovery, you need to be able to spin those servers up. And then another key piece is being able to connect to those servers. So these are some key aspects of disaster recovery. It's not just backing up the server, not just moving it to the cloud, but being able to spin it up and being able to connect to that those resources so that you can continue running your business. And then, of course, another piece is being able to fail back. So after the disaster on-prem has been resolved, taking those images and all of the changes that have been captured while you were continuing the running of your business from the cloud, bringing those virtual instances or bringing those server images back to on-prem to reestablish your on-prem environment. So that's more or less a high-level overview of the architecture. I think now would be a great time to jump right into the demo. And what I'll do is I will begin to share my screen with you all. And Christophe, if you could tell me if you see the login screen.
It is up and running, yes. All good.
Excellent. And so this is our management portal. As I mentioned, if you have access to a web browser and the internet, you can log into the management portal. We went for simplicity and ease of use. So much of what you see, we were aiming at making it very easy and simple to use. So here I'm going to log in with my credentials. We also support Google two-factor authentication. So if you need extra security for any of your users that are logging in, we have that capability as well. So here I'm simply going to sign in. Now we have a couple views. You have the ability to view this as a single user, but this, as you can see, is our managed service provider view. And at any time, I have a list of customers that I'm protecting. As you see, a summary of 7 customers, a total of 20 systems across those 7 customers, and upwards of 800 plus gigabytes of data under protection. I can add any customer or additional customers at any time. I get a view of those customers, the storage usage of those users. I can kind of scan across here to see that usage over time. If I want more detail about a particular customer, I simply highlight that customer's information, and I can see that this customer, Acme customer number 1, has 14 systems under protection. And I'll walk through some of these other additional tabs to kind of give you some information about those as well. So, of course, we want to take a look at the systems. This is our systems view. So these are all the systems that are being protected for this Acme customer 1. And as I mentioned, we have 2 options for protection. We have agent-based as well as agentless. So when we have an agent-based approach, you deploy a lightweight backup software to the system. This can be deployed to Windows systems, Linux, or Mac systems. And with Linux and Mac systems, what we allow you to do is back those systems up. But with Windows, of course, you get more capabilities. In fact, you get the opportunity to back up the entire image. Now, I'll go into our virtualization, because if it's a virtualized environment, the system can be running Windows or Linux. We can capture the entire virtual machine. But from an agent-based approach, as you can see here, you can even filter if you want to see just those systems that are being protected with the software agent. Here you get a view of the operating system, name of the system, when it was last backed up, so as well as the status of that last backup. Also, when it started, when it ended, and the duration. At any point in time, if you wish to kick off a backup, you could do that ad hoc, or anytime you access the browser, you come in here, you hit backup to kick off and initiate a backup. I'll go into a bit about disaster recovery in a moment. But one of the key pieces is configuring. So agent-based configuring is you click on the configuration tab, and then you go and you click add backup task. So you can have multiple backup tasks per system. So here, as you can see, I'm doing a SQL backup, as well as I'm backing up the entire Windows image. And you have other options. You could do files and folders as well. If this server was connected or had access to NetApp shares, it can back up NetApp shares as well. So that could be yet another task. We also allow for pre and post script backup scripting. So if you need to do something prior to performing the backup, or if you want to do some checks after the backup is completed, that capability is available as well. And so once you set up your backup task, 1 or more per system, you can specify the schedule. So you can specify it on a daily basis, days of the week. You also have the option to set up bandwidth throttles. So if you want to make sure that you control or restrict the amount of bandwidth that the backup solution is using at a particular time, you're able to do that. And you can actually stack these, so you can have multiple throughout the day. So if you can open it up before folks come into work, maybe you can shut it down during the morning period, open it back up at lunchtime, maybe when people are away at lunch, and then you can shut it down for the remainder of the day, and then once again open it back up for the evening time. So you have those capabilities as well. And then, of course, a very key piece is the ability to do a restore. Right, so once I do a backup, so all you need to do is you select the backup task from which you wish to restore. You click the button here. Now you can restore the entire image as I selected this image, or if I'm only looking for that Word document or that PowerPoint presentation that I wish to restore, then I can go in and I can browse quickly through this backup or this image and then download the file that I'm looking for. So you have that file level of restore. Right. So this is more or less our backup as a service capability. And a key point here is that we do backup as a service as well as disaster recovery as a service. So backup as a service, you take your data from on-prem directly to the cloud, and if you need that data, you simply restore it. Now, the other key piece that we want to introduce before I will jump into the agentless protection, as I mentioned, we also do agentless protection. So if you have an environment that includes VMware, or if you have an environment that's a virtualized environment running Microsoft Hyper-V, we can support you in that. Here, we have a virtual, for VMware, we have a virtual appliance that you deploy into your vSphere environment. It talks to vCenter, and as you can see here, it discovers all of the virtual machines in your environment. Now, at any point in time, if you want to protect any of these virtual machines, then you simply hit Enable Backup. And when you do that, what that does is that tells in this case, the virtual appliance to back up those virtual machines from on-prem directly to the cloud. Now, if you have a Hyper-V environment, the backup agent itself, once deployed to a Hyper-V enabled Windows server, will communicate with the Hyper-V server and then allow you to discover those VMs and then allow you, in a very similar way, select the virtual machines that you wish to back up, and then those virtual machines will be backed up. Now, from this view, once you enable backups, you go back to your Systems tab, and then these systems will appear. So as you can see, I'm seeing all my systems. These here are the agentless systems, or the systems that are being agentlessly protected by this solution. So this is the virtual appliance that is communicating with vCenter, has discovered those virtual machines. You've gone in, you've specified which virtual machines you wish to protect, and now they're listed on your systems of the systems that are being protected. And if you have a long list of systems and you want to, kind of determine which ones are agent-based, which ones are agentless, once again, you have this ability to do this filtering. So here, these are all the agentlessly protected systems. So now another key piece, and one of the key pieces that we mentioned today, is the ability to do disaster recovery. So all within the same user management or console, if you will. So here's the ability to enable disaster recovery. So once a customer subscribes to disaster recovery, we provision that virtual data center for you on our back end, on our cloud. You have all your resources that you need. And then when you come into your management portal, this management portal here, you'll see this button to enable disaster recovery. When you see this button, the ability to enable disaster recovery is really straightforward and simple. You simply hit Enable Disaster Recovery. We show you what the bootable disk is, because you have to capture the entire image, and especially the bootable disk, so that you can boot up a virtual instance of this server in the cloud. Here, you specify how much RAM you want. When you subscribe to disaster recovery, you tell us how much RAM you need that you want to provision in terms of gigabytes across the servers that you're protecting with our solution. And then what you do is you optionally specify which licenses are on those servers, and then you simply hit save. Once you hit save, the button goes from enabled disaster recovery to this indication that this is disaster recovery enabled. And as you can see here, this system, this particular system, is disaster recovery enabled. Now, when I go to click the configuration here, you'll notice a slight difference from our backup solution to our disaster recovery solution. And this is what Christoph was mentioning today. This is our where we launched the fight against day-old data, where you have the ability to schedule backups as frequently as every 6 hours. Well, you can set it for 24 hours, every 6 hours, every hour, or every 15 minutes. And you can do this on a daily basis. And so every day you can do backups every 15 minutes, or you have the flexibility if you want to do it every day, every other day for every 15 minutes. But the key is that we give you this ability to do 15-minute backups directly to the cloud, from on-prem directly to the cloud, and you have that capability. So here, as you can see, I've configured my disaster recovery for this particular system at every 15 minutes. You'll also notice that I have a combination of the solution right in this management portal. Some systems I'm protecting with backup as a service. Other systems that may be a little more critical, maybe a little more valuable, I'm protecting with my disaster recovery capability. Right? So once I enable a system for disaster recovery, it will appear on the disaster recovery tab. I'll go through some of the other things that you see on the page here. But as you can see, if I scroll down here, these are all of the systems that are being protected with the disaster recovery solution. One thing that we do is that we will periodically boot up these systems and make sure to kind of give you that level of confidence that they are indeed bootable. So we boot them up, we take a screenshot of the login screen, and then we shut them down. So as you can see, this is my Windows server, and then here's my Linux server. So I've booted it up, took a screenshot, and then I've deactivated, if you will. So if I want to activate any of these systems or recover these systems, I simply hit activate, and then I select the recovery point from which I wish to recover, which will be the basis when this server boots up. And as was mentioned, we can go back 24 hours, 6 hours, or as Christoph mentioned, we can go back to as frequently as early as 15 minutes ago. And why don't we do that? So I'll click this for 15 minutes. I simply hit activate. Now, as you can see, this activate starts to process. And as Christoph also mentioned, the RTO of about 5 minutes. So it takes about the time for the operating system to boot. This is a Windows system, so it may take a couple minutes for it to boot. And while it is booting, I will explore a bit more about the management portal. So here we give you the ability to set up port mapping or port forwarding. So you have that capability, because a very key piece about disaster recovery is not just spinning up the server in the cloud, but being able to connect to it, because you actually need to use it once it has been recovered in the cloud. Those options for connecting to it, we give you two. We give you you can establish a point-to-site VPN connection, or you can establish a site-to-site VPN connection. Point-to-site, just think of, okay, I need to go to a coffee shop and I need to establish a secure VPN or virtual private network connection from my laptop into the network of the virtual data center that we provision. The other option is site-to-site. Now here is where we establish a secure virtual private network connection between your on-prem network and the network that's running in the virtual data center that we've provisioned for you. This is ideal for, you may see the term IP takeover. Not all disasters are complete wipeouts of the on-prem environment. Maybe one or maybe two servers go down while the remaining servers are up and running. Well, with a site-to-site VPN connection, this will allow you to continue those servers that are functioning on-prem, and then spin up those failed servers in the cloud, recover them in the cloud, and then allow those on-prem servers to communicate with those recovered servers that are running in the cloud via this site-to-site VPN connection. So that's yet another option to recover in the event of a partial disaster, if you will. Now, a bit more about some of the tabs or the pages of this management interface. We have volumes. Volumes are logical containers where data is stored. So each volume has a retention policy. So if you need a retention policy of 1 month or 1 year, or if you need several retention policies, one for 1 year, one for 3 years, one for 7 years, you have that capability. So these are the logical containers. And it kind of gives you an idea of where the data is being stored, how much is being stored in that data or in those volumes. Just logical containers, and you can always have as many as you need. Usage, here's a graphical representation of the usage where you can see some of the peaks and some of the valleys of when more data is needed to be backed up. A bit about the backup is that the very first backup is a full backup, and then after that is only incrementals. So that kind of optimally uses your bandwidth there. We don't retransmit everything. We only transmit the changes. And so here you can look more recently, or you can go back in time to see how things were earlier. So as you can see here, things rolled off maybe as a result of retention expiring. So once the retention is expired, that data is removed. Reporting, a very key aspect of the solution. The daily digest that you see here is a daily report that we send to the administrators who have access to this management portal. It's a daily email. In the body of the email is a table of all the systems that that are being protected by the solution. It gives you a list of their backup status, when they were last backed up, how long the backup took to complete, and then actually how much data was transferred in during that backup. So that's all very good data to have. You also have the option to create other backup reports. So here you can schedule this to be, or you can have it be done on demand. So hey, send me this backup report, which will list all. It'll send you an email with an attachment that has all of your systems listed, how much, when they were last backed up, the status of those backups, and how much data was transferred. Or you can have the report to be scheduled for delivery. You can give it a name, give it a time for when it should be delivered, the frequency, and then also who has access to the report, right? You may want to send it to only those people who have access to the management portal, or you could send it to external. So if you're running this as a managed service provider and you don't want your customers to log in to this management portal, but you do want to keep them abreast of how the backups are going with their systems, then you just simply add them as an additional email recipient. Another key piece about the reporting is that you can send the report and have it encompass information about all of the systems, or if a customer is really, sensitive about a couple of systems, then you can just have the report sent and only include those systems that the customer is completely sensitive about. And so this is a key reporting capability. You can get backup reports, restore reports, task and volume, so you can see which systems are backing up to which volumes, as well as backup alerts. So send me an alert when a backup completes successfully, when it fails, or send me an alert if a system has missed a backup. So we will let you know that if maybe a server was powered off, or maybe somebody unplugged the server and it was not on during its scheduled backup, then we will let you know that one of your key systems has missed a backup. We also have an account activity. So when people have logged in, when people have initiated backups, when people have registered a new system, when people have maybe changed the retention cycle, all of that can be captured in your reporting. Users, you can assign different users with different roles. Here, I'm logged in at the managed service provider view, so I can see all customers. This view is the users for this particular customer. So we have those two levels of capability. So for this particular customer, customer one, I can give them, full admin rights, or just be able to let people log in and see how much data they're using. I can also just allow people to log in and have the ability just to do restores. That's at the customer level. At the managed service provider level, I have the flexibility to say, hey, this admin has access to all of my customers, or this admin only has access or administrative access to customers 1 and 2. So you have that capability as well. So now with that explanation over those, let's go back, and hopefully this is a live demo. Hopefully our system has properly booted, and fortunately it has. So as I mentioned, we provision a virtual data center for you. It has a network, so as you can see when we powered on this system, which has 16 gigabytes of RAM, it has its own IP address. We kind of give you the indication of the CPU utilization. You can establish a remote desktop connection to this server and then simply use your Windows credentials to log in. You can power it on, power it off, you can restart it. And then another key piece, as I've mentioned in the architectural or the workflow overview, is once the system is running in the event of a disaster, your users are using these resources that are running in the cloud, and they are capturing changes. So after your on-prem environment is back up and running, you can initiate a failback. And what this failback does is it takes a snapshot of this image and its changes that are running in the cloud, and then begins to transfer that image from the cloud back to your on-prem environment. So that's that whole experience with disaster recovery. We capture it, we push it to the cloud with backups as frequently as every 15 minutes. It's a full backup. After that is just the changes. You're able to spin that up in the cloud. You're able to connect to those systems with a couple of options for connectivity. And then after the disaster is resolved, you're able to bring those images back down and use those as a core starting point in the recovery of your on-prem environment. And so with that, I'd like to turn it back over to David. That concludes the presentation or the demonstration of our UDP, or Universal Data Protection Cloud Direct solution, both backup as a service as well as disaster recovery as a service. Back over to you, David.
All right, thank you, Keith. Great. All right, well, we're getting a lot of great questions. Keep those coming. Select the question widget in your screen and submit a question there. All right, well, let's dive into some of these. This first question is, what happens if I get hit by ransomware?
So let me start taking this one, and then I think Keith can add to this. First of all, if you get hit by ransomware, and of course you have protected your data in our cloud with the ArcServe Cloud Direct, what will happen is that depending on how quickly you stop the ransomware attack, you will have more or less damage to your files or systems. Now, the good news is that if you stop it quickly enough and you haven't synced between the time that you get hit and essentially the time you go look at your backups, it's very unlikely you've actually replicated the ransomware or the infected file. That could happen, but if you stop it quickly enough, luckily it hasn't happened. By the way, we do not execute anything in our data center. So even if you've replicated the infected file, maybe it's a document that one of your end users downloaded, and that's how it's spread. Well, you can ideally isolate that system, that node, and go back to a recovery time or recovery point in time where that was before that replication happened. Our data center will not be hit by the same type of attacks, for sure. So typically you get hit because typically it's, again, an end user that downloads something. And of course, the backup in our data center, because there's no active production there, in a sense, will not be hit by the same ransomware. So these are just the high-level points on this. It's a great way, by the way, to recover from a ransomware event, because you can literally dial things back to before the attack and selectively restore systems, or just stand them up and run from our cloud if you're really totally down, which we've seen some customers having this type of issue. Keith, what do you think? Is there anything I missed?
Yep, I think you covered it well.
Thank you.
Okay, let's get to this one from Angie. Is it possible to first subscribe to the Cloud Direct BAS and then later subscribe to Cloud Direct DRAS?
Absolutely. You can do a combination of both. So you can have the management portal. So you can have some systems with BAS or backup as a service where you're backing up and restoring, and some systems being protected with the disaster recovery. Or you can start out with systems and saying, hey, I only want to do backup as a service, and then later come and tell us, hey, you know what, I now want to protect these with disaster recovery. when you would let us know how much RAM you need, we would provision that virtual data center for you. You would go into the management portal. You would then see, hey, I can enable disaster recovery for these systems, and then those systems would be protected with disaster recovery, and then at that point you can spin them up. So Angie, yes, you can.
Okay, let's look at this next one. How long will it keep backups? Sometimes users tell me that they lost something a year ago or more, but don't know when it was lost and need it now.
Yes, so that all depends on your retention policy that you set up. So if you need it for 1 year, you need it 2 years. So those are the volume containers. So each logical container or volume can have a retention period. And if that data has been backed up to that volume that has that 1 year or 2 year, 3 year retention policy, then you're able to go back into that volume. You're able to transverse. When you go to restore, transverse all of your restore points, select the restore point where you think the data is, and then you can browse through and then find that file that customer needs right away and just simply download it and then make sure that they get it or restore it.
Okay, this next one is, what about Exchange servers or other application-specific services? SQL, Active Directory.
Yes, so from a backup perspective, we can, if you deploy the agent to the server or Windows server or an Exchange server, you can go in and select a specific backup task to back up your Exchange or SQL database data. If you're using disaster recovery, then what you would want to do is back up the entire server. And you can back up the entire server and then, of course, restore. So from a backup perspective, we can protect a SQL and Exchange database files and logs. So you can back them up, restore them, and then if you're looking to protect the entire server and then at some point spin that up in the cloud, then you would protect the entire server using disaster recovery.
Okay, this one from George Soul. Where is the content located? Is it accessible in other countries, China?
It's not available in China, so the data is backed up to our data centers. We have 2 here in the U.S., one on the West Coast in Santa Clara, one on the East Coast in New Jersey, and then we just recently opened a data center in the UK in Manchester. So the data would be stored there depending on which data center you so choose.
All right, let's look at a couple more here. Is there a separate charge for the ArcServe virtual appliance for VMware?
There's not a separate charge for the ArcServe virtual appliance for VMware. So when you subscribe to Backup as a Service or Disaster Recovery as a Service, it includes unlimited deployments of the lightweight backup agent as well as the virtual appliance. And what you're charged on from a backup as a service solution is the cloud storage. And from a disaster recovery perspective, you're charged for the storage to back up the system images and then the compute resources in terms of gigabytes of RAM.
Okay. This one from T. Roberts. Are you compatible with SOX or HIPAA?
Yes, we are SOX and HIPAA compliant. So, and if you would need us to sign a business agreement, we have done that for customers and partners in the past as well.
Okay, this one from Shelby. With recovering data that is a day old, what are the chances that the file is fully functional by the date time of the backup? How safe is it?
The file is, by the time we do the backup, it is fully functional and is fully intact. So if you're doing a backup, you have it. It is safe in that it's protected with encryption from the time it leaves so it's protected during flight as well as at rest. if that addresses Shelby's question. So it is a complete image or a capture of the file, or in the case if you're backing up the complete image, it is a complete image of the system. So if you needed to restore it, then you would have it to be able to restore either the entire image or the particular file that you're backing up and trying to recover.
Okay, and this one, what is the recommended bandwidth needed for cloud connection?
Yeah, so if you really want to do 15-minute RPO, then of course you want to have the available bandwidth to support that that frequently the backups of that frequent repetition. So I would say in the order of tens of megabits per second.
Okay, just a couple of more here.
And then you could just a bit more on that one, David. The key part, though, is that it also depends on your change rate. So remember, after the first initial backup, we do a full backup. But then after that, if your change rate on your system that you're protecting every 15 minutes is relatively small, then what you're transferring over the wire or to the cloud will also be relatively small, and thus the bandwidth should be sufficient for you to get that data up there. But if you have a system that you're protecting that has a high change rate, that has a lot of changes, lots of gigabytes, then of course you want to make sure that you have the an acceptable amount of bandwidth to so that those backups complete. Good.
Okay. This one came in from Crazy Lefty. It really looks like ArcServe isn't bringing anything new to the table. What's the magic item that will pull me away from Veeam?
So that's an interesting question. Let me take this one, Keith, and maybe you can add to it. So first things first, let's compare oranges and oranges, right? ArcServe UDP Cloud Direct is, born in the cloud DRaaS solution. So it's direct to cloud. So you don't need an appliance. You do not need software on premise. It's a direct to cloud. So it goes from disk to cloud versus the disk to cloud type of topology that you would have with Veeam. A few things. If you're looking now at the disk to cloud, so in other words, comparing our solution to Veeam, we have another solution called ArcServe UDP on-premise or appliance that does a number of things that Veeam won't do. For example, deduplication, support for online SharePoint, things like that. So you're comparing very different topologies if you're comparing to Cloud Direct. Now, I know that there is a cloud option also with Veeam, but it's just like we do with our traditional on-premise solution, if you will. We support public cloud, we support private cloud, and we support what we call hybrid solutions, where it goes to an ArcServe cloud solution as well. So I think these are very different solutions. They have their merits. If you're comfortable with your current solution, by all means, don't change something that's not broken. But if you're looking to really protect those decentralized environments, to minimize your on-premise equipment, Cloud Direct is definitely the way to go. Keith?
Yeah, those are very good points too, as well as far as who's running the service. These are our data centers. We manage our backend with Veeam. I think their solution, you deploy the Veeam software on-prem, and then you have to work with one of their partners to manage your backend. Here, we're delivering you the software that does the backup, and we're also managing the backend, your data in our data center. So yeah, you're dealing with us versus Veeam, as well as one of Veeam's partners. So that's yet one of the differences. And then we also wanted to make sure that we have a hosted interface that you can access, make it easy to use, whether using backup as well as disaster recovery as a service, all in one user interface. So those are just a couple in addition to what you've mentioned, Christophe.
Right, and I think if you want on-premise as well, if you were to compare, if you want it on-premise and in the cloud, definitely ArcServe UDP so not Cloud Direct, but ArcServe UDP and ArcServe UDP, what we call Cloud Hybrid, is the equivalent type of topology from a disk to cloud perspective. And by the way, we offer it as an appliance as well, so you could literally deploy appliances. So you have options. As I said earlier, in some cases it makes perfect sense to have on-premise as your first line of defense. In other cases, you may be perfectly comfortable with a direct to cloud, which has a lot of advantages, as we explained. So I would say again, think about how much, if you're looking at disk to cloud, what type of how much storage do you need? Is the duplication working? To what extent? What type of platforms are supported? Do you use tape or not? I mean, there are a number of other dimensions that come into play as you look at the type of vendor you may want to pick.
All right. Well, we've just about out of time, and I will just remind everyone, if you submitted a question and we didn't get to it, we'll have a chance to answer it after today or follow up after today. And a reminder that you'll also get an email with a link to view the recording on demand. So if you stepped away or missed any part of it, you can come back and take a view of it. So I'd like to thank Christophe and Keith for their presentation today, and for ArcServe creating the content and sponsoring this great event. We look forward to having another SpiceWorks Partner webinar, and I'll thank everyone for participating today, and we'll look for you next time. Thank you, everyone. Take care.